Welcome everyone. My name is Juan Carlos Lopez. I am the Director of Teaching and Learning for the Maple League of Universities, and also I'm a director of the board of the Society of Teaching and Learning in Higher Education. So this is a joint event where we invited two of my very admired and dear friends and colleagues, and I'm really, truly excited to have him here. So I will start by saying that I'm coming to you from the Mi'kma'ki, the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I I say these words as my commitment to listen and listen and listen. And after I'm done listening, a very colleague of mine says, go back and listen and listen and listen again. I want to listen to learn about the truth. I want to listen to learn about what had happened and what still happens in this land. And with that knowledge, move towards decolonization and reconciliation with the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. So I also want to mention that these lands I'm coming to you from have received people of African descent in different waves. The story, the first recorded record is more than 400 years old, and it's a person that came, Da Costa, that came as a translator between the colonizers and the Mi'kmaq. So that story in itself is very rich, because for this person to come as a translator, there had to be contact, right? And they had to have the ability to speak that language. So that story in itself is very rich. And I say that also as my commitment to listen and listen and listen and learn about the truth of what had happened, what still happens, and with that move towards a better future for everyone. I say those words as an immigrant and a settler in these lands. So with that, I will go back to how excited I am to welcome today Ann Braithwaite and Natasha Kenny to do a joint seminar between the Maple League and the Society of Teaching and Learning for Higher Education. And I'm gonna read a very quick. I could spend a whole day going, but I'm just gonna be very quick, and I'm gonna read off the screen so that I don't forget and I don't make mistakes. So Ann Braithwaite is a professor and coordinator of diversity and social justice studies at the University of Prince Edward, Ireland. Dr. Braithwaite's scholarly work examines how disciplines such as women's and gender studies are constructed through languages and narratives that reflect a set of citational practices and embedded ways of knowing, asking what versions of the discipline these assumptions make possible, what possibilities they shut down, and how attending those questions matters. Dr. Braithwaite is also in the Society of Teaching and Learning in Higher Education. She's the board of directors, but she was also the one of the founding members of the what is now the Equity Committee, and we work together in that capacity. And she's the recipient of numerous teaching educational awards in educational leadership, service awards at UPEI. She was also awarded in 2014, the Association of Atlantic Universities and Mary McKinnon Educational Leadership Award, and is a 2021 3M National Teaching Fellow. Natasha Kenny, Dr. Natasha Kenny holds a PhD from the in Land Resources Sciences and is Executive Director of the University of Calgary's Taylor Institute for Teaching and Learning. In her role, Natasha leads and collaborates with colleagues across the teaching and learning in the Teaching and Learning Institute and the university to strengthen teaching and learning practices, cultures, and communities. Natasha is also a certified coach accredited through International Coaching Federation. Natasha is committed to giving back to the community, having co-led the University of Calgary's United Way campaign as a member of the Educational Developer Caucus of Canada's executive team, and now as a board of director for the Society of Teaching and Learning in Higher Education. Full disclosure, the three of us are on the board, so we have spent a lot of time together. But I should add my little note that I have met these colleagues in different teaching and learning spaces and in different capacities, and I have lots of admiration. And I just that this is why I'm so excited to have you join us today. So with that, I'm gonna step to the back. I'm gonna be doing the see this thing at meeting people and doing those things. So I'm gonna be here on the back. I'm gonna hand you the virtual microphone, and I'm gonna let you lead your session. And thank you everyone for coming. And I'm here. And if there is a time thing or anything, I'll be here. And ask for any help, I'll just be in the background for you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Juan Carlos. It's so awesome to be here with you and everybody else. And thank you for inspiring this session. I know it's a beautiful partnership between the Maple League and Stelly, and we're so grateful to be here together. And I have so much admiration for both Juan Carlos and Anne. So it is a real privilege to be here with them and with all of you. Before we started, we wanted to give a little context as to why we're here and what format will be following today, and hopefully invite you to engage in the conversation as well. So when we think about the whole premise of the Maple League and Better Together, I think that reflects our collective commitment in teaching and learning in higher education and educational development and teaching and learning centers, to our commitment to shared learning, to community and relationality. And we think now more than ever that is important, because as we lean into learning in difficult times, as was reflected in our title, this really goes back to, I think all of us, and please feel free to add to this, were shocked, a little bit surprised when we saw the articles come out of the Chronicle. How quickly teaching and learning centers moved from the emergency responders and academic heroes, these were all things we heard during the pandemic, to being on the chopping block in higher education. And as we grappled with what was being communicated in those articles, we also saw some hope in the responses that were present across social media, especially on LinkedIn. I think there were some really thoughtful responses across the world to those Chronicle articles. And we really see that during these difficult times where we think about, polycrises, where we think about the geopolitical instability, we also think about the wicked problems or grand challenges we're facing in higher education, that it would be great to come together in community. And we wanted to follow up specifically on a blog that we wrote, and a little plug here for Stelly's new Higher Ground blog, that we've created to try and really strengthen Stelly's position as thought leaders and advocates for teaching and learning. So Juan Carlos is going to put a link to that blog in the chat. But we're here today to expand on that conversation. And one of the things, Anne, feel free to jump in here, that Anne wanted to make sure that we reflect here is that many of the ideas we reflect today may not be new. But we think that these are conversations that you're all having in your local context. And we thought that this was another opportunity to come together, to engage in meaningful conversations about what we're living into in higher education right now and in teaching and learning right now. In terms of structure, we decided that it would be best to have a conversation today. So we don't have a formal PowerPoint. We do have a relatively loose agenda and some ideas that we'd like to bring forward. So we're going to really delve into three key questions. And Juan Carlos, can you put those in the chat for us? That we've been grappling with over the last couple of weeks as Juan Carlos invited us to come together for this conversation. And a lot of this is framed over what we're hearing, but also what we feel about higher education. So we didn't want to just make this about challenges. We also wanted to make this about hope and about how we move forward collectively. So what we'd like to invite you to do during our conversation is Anne and I will be coaching each other through a panel discussion. But as we do that, we'd love for you to reflect in the chat. We'd love for you to reflect on these questions as a whole. We'd also love for you to reflect on what emerges or what is challenging for you or what other questions come up as you hear what we're discussing. And Cynthia, I already love your focus on critical hope. As we all know that Jessica Riddell has written a lot about critical hope, and that's you know, it's a term I use often and affectionately with many educational leaders across campus right now. We will leave some time at the end for questions, and Juan Carlos will help us facilitate those. But we're eager to dive in. Anne, do you have anything to add to that introduction?
You covered it all.
That's good. We've got a lot of notes, everyone. So we Anne and I never have trouble engaging in conversation together. So we're excited to do that with you all today. And so with that, Anne, maybe I'll pose the first question to you, and maybe I'll preface that during my RSL 2 years ago, I engaged in questions. I interviewed all teaching and learning center leaders across the U15. The U15 are Canada's large research intensive institutions, to which the University of Calgary is one, to really consider what the shifts and transformations they were experiencing teaching and learning. And without fail, every single question came back to what is the purpose and value of higher education, and how is that shifting right now? So we thought we'd start there. But then also, and so if you could reflect on your thoughts about what we think or what you think the purpose and value of higher education is, but also maybe what's emerging for us given all the shifts, transformations, and pressures that we're currently experiencing in higher ed. So start us off, and I'll build upon a little bit of your reflections.
Thank you for all that, and thanks for that great introduction. And Juan Carlos, thanks for the great introduction. Also, I feel like the bar got set real high, right? And I love, Natasha, that you said we don't have a prepared PowerPoint, because I have never learned how to use PowerPoint, and I am aiming to retire without ever learning how to use PowerPoint. So far, I'm making it, but we'll see, right? Anyways, if yeah. Doesn't matter. I use other things instead, but not PowerPoint. So, but when I think about this question, right, and Natasha's right. I mean, when we got together to sort of think about how do we want to organize this and what do we want to say, we talked for like over an hour, just kind of, just by going. But we do have some notes, because there's some things I do want to hit upon. And so when I think about sort of the state of higher education or post-secondary education right now, and I'll preface by saying, like many people, I love universities, I hate universities. I'm in a university, right? That there are days I think it's the best job. It is the best job in the world for me, right? Teaching is the best job in the world. But there's a lot going on in universities that also just makes you want to pull your hair out sometime, right? And that makes me think about one of the primary things that I think about in thinking about teaching and learning in difficult times is what makes these times difficult, right? And the difficult times aren't just internal to post-secondary education or post-secondary institutions, but they're sort of much broader, obviously. And so I think right away about how we're positioned in a larger context that is increasingly anti-intellectual and anti-expertise, right? Or that only wants very particular kinds of expertise, as, Mark Carney keeps telling us. And so, excuse me, I think about that larger context and what that context is doing for us, right? And the way in which that larger context of anti-intellectualism, anti-expertise, I promised I get to critical hope later, but I start with this, right? But I think about what it's doing, or the way it's manifest in post-secondary is, of course, through cuts in programs, cuts in all kinds of services, right? Teaching and learning centers being cut. The Nova Scotia Community College sector just announced it was I'm in PEI, right? But it just announced it was cutting a whole bunch of librarian positions, right? And so this kind of what is it that seems to many of us, I think, in this room today, what seems sort of like essential and fundamental to the knowledge project that is post-secondary education is even within post-secondary education being cut, right? So, so I think about that sort of larger context. Obviously, that context we see it reflected all around us in terms of what I want to call anti-science perspective, but I am not here to be an apologist for science and say we should always unquestioningly accept whatever part of science you want to talk about. I'm just noting what Natasha's doing in the chat. Thank you. That much harm has obviously been done under the umbrella term science also, but I think the rejection of that these days is not done in the service of asking better questions, exploring embedded assumptions, thinking about what are the functions and consequences of particular kinds of knowledge claims, whether they're under the rubric of science or any other, right? They're just a kind of wholesale rejection. And so that makes a big difference, I think, in thinking about what it means to be anti-expertise or to question expertise, which seems very different. I got so much more to say about all of it. Oh, I do want to say something. Yeah, I'll stop in a moment, Natasha.
It's okay, go.
But I've been thinking, and this will be sort of this will resonate with hopefully everyone, but certainly folks in Alberta. I think about a recent statement by the Minister of Education and Childcare. I had to go look up what his title was, right? Who said a few weeks ago that schools should teach students how to think, not what to think. And I always think about how completely impossible it is to separate those kinds of ideas, right? That it's wrong to begin with, and that there's a kind of an investment of some sort in maintaining that these things can be separated. The how to think is never neutral or universal, right? It's always fully entangled with what to think. And I think sort of as a one really basic example, if you're the whole sort of like, we got to go back to reading and writing, right? Teach students how to read and write, but you cannot teach reading and writing without thinking about what they're reading and writing about. And perhaps more to the point, reading and writing themselves are colonial structures that reflect particular ways of being, knowing, and doing in the world, right? Not all cultures around the world write in the way that we think of writing. And so when we say that we're teaching reading and writing, we're teaching not just a how, but we're teaching a what to think, right? So, and I can go on about that forever. And I'm just sort of trying to read the chat at the same time because it's kind of going, which I love. But the second thing I want to say, if I can say one more thing, Natasha, is because two things are really striking me about this question, right? So one is the larger context, can go on about that forever. But the second major thing, and it was in some of the publicity Juan Carlos put together, was to think about teaching as teaching is always an equity issue. We know this, right? But the who we teach and how we teach is as important as the what we teach. And given the example I just said, I don't think they can be disentangled from each other at all. The idea that they can be, or that we're not even, many for a long time in the post-secondary sector aren't thinking about the imbrication or the entanglement of these ideas, says a lot about the assumptions of who was in the classroom, right? Who were universities for, and how all sorts of other ways of being, knowing, and doing got kind of like weeded out or failed out of schooling to begin with, right? But the more we attend to or pay attention to who is in the classroom, right? Who is part of our post-secondary sector, right? We have to think about, so how are we reaching them? And then what are we reaching them with, right? What is the purpose of, and that goes back to something you started us with, Natasha, what is the purpose of post-secondary education, right? Is it just kind of like to dump content as if content is this sort of neutral, universal, and unchanging thing? I don't think anybody here thinks that, right? But the minute we start asking that question, we have to start paying a lot more attention to who's in the room, who do we want to be in the room, because who's not in the room is also part of this. Anyways, I can go on forever. Natasha, please jump in, take over.
Yeah, no, I want to jump in on a couple of things because I think, I'm definitely living the realities of the Alberta context, the calls for more focus on what's important to industry, what's important to government. So when I recently, I was on a panel actually with the Minister of Advanced Education, and he said many things that concerned me. And please know that I also heard and saw during that I am living the realities of a government that leads through fear. And I definitely saw that day. I think it's a very strategic positioning that this government takes, but I think, again, we're hearing more about the importance of employability and about employability skills. And I agree. And we see that one of the reasons that students are here is because they do want to have meaningful employment at the end of their university degree. And I emphasize the meaningful there, because what I'm seeing in this generation of students is folks that really want to do work that is not only meaningful to them, but meaningful to society. So how are we providing those opportunities? And I see lots of folks in the chat focus about the broader purposes of higher education, whether that's, and Anne, you really did emphasize this, developing critical thinkers and especially engaged citizens that are committing to improving society for all. contributing to innovation and both the preservation and creation of knowledge. I don't want to lose the emphasis on preservation of knowledge, because as we think of the importance of our librarians and archives, in 2 weeks, I'll be joining an elder from Tsuut'ina Nation to go through the archives of the Anglican Diocese to track some of the nation's history. So that's just one example of thinking about the importance of those functions that a university plays. But also, maybe one thing that hasn't come up, and if it has, please correct me, is supporting learners as they become whole beings, as they develop their identities, as they connect through community, as they develop self-understanding, self-actualization, becoming more fully themselves. All of these things happen through higher education. And I think also that notion of community engagement, and maybe that links a little bit to engaged citizenship. But I want to go back to employability and the calls for employability. And part of our responsibility, I think, is reflecting back the data and also reflecting back these broader narratives about the purpose of higher education. But at University of Calgary, 95% of graduates have a job after 6 months. And also the economic benefits of institutions cannot be understated. So we recently published our community report here. The University of Calgary contributed over $28 billion in economic benefit to the local economy, and almost 19,000 jobs. And those numbers speak volumes that when we want to strengthen innovation in Canada, we also have to strengthen our institutions of higher education. So to me, when I think about the purpose of higher education, I simply state that higher education, it transforms individuals, it transforms organizations, it transforms societies, and it transforms the world. And we can't not absolutely lose sight of this. And for me, what's emerging right now is, I think, the importance of coming together like this, that when we think about influencing change, what maybe was missing most from those articles that we read is the broader work that teaching and learning centers do in facilitating knowledge sharing across the institution, in developing communities, in engaging in research and teaching and learning, and ensuring academic programs are engaged in curriculum review and development to ensure that academic programs are meaningful and relevant. So, and the other thing that's emerging for me right now is I don't know a leader out there, an academic leader out there, and I'm going to speak a lot from a leadership position here because that's where kind of my lens is. But also that I don't know one leader that has the answers to the challenges that we're facing. So I think our strength in teaching and learning is to come together and grapple with these really challenging problems, to ask great questions, to be curious, and to listen deeply and bring people together to surface how we can move forward, kind of take incremental steps towards positive change. And I also want to acknowledge the work that we do every day is really tough. It takes humility and it takes self-compassion. And I hope we all model that a little bit in every day of our practices. So maybe I'll leave it at that, Anne, and we can move on to the next more hopeful question.
Can I add a couple of things quickly?
Yeah,
We're probably like blowing our questions out of the air right now because we're just going back and forth between them all over the place.
Yeah.
And in fact, the very first comment was critical hope, right? So people are already doing that for us. But I think about, so for various reasons, the other things I'm involved in, we're setting up a new med school at UPEI. So I was off at a meeting about some of that, like what the curriculum could be the other day. And then I'm the president of the provincial NDP party, and we're putting together a platform. So I was in a meeting about that last night. Look at me doing like horn tooting here, right? But the question of health came up a lot, right? And I think about how much health sustainability, whatever, of individuals, of communities, right, of relationships, and relationships not just to other humans, but to non-human animals and the environments of which we're a part, how much those depend on voice, empowerment, making place for people, making place for diverse voices and ways of being, knowing, and doing, and that just gets kind of left out all too often. So just adding to what you were saying, Natasha, that I don't think we can think about what we're doing in post-secondary education without thinking about I don't like the word health, right? Because it feels like really prescriptive most of the
Yeah.
time in the way that it gets used, right? But I do want us to think about, which is what you were pointing to, we can't just stop at employability, right? That
Yeah.
we have to think that what we're doing in the post-secondary sectors is, and hopefully through all schooling, right, and throughout one's life, is really thinking about what are the factors in the characteristics of the things that add to the health and sustainability of individuals and communities,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But then the second thing I'd want to add too is I think and I forget how I got to it, but I wrote down knowledge here, right? That I think that what we do also, like employability is one thing, but the ability to ask good questions of the state of the world, right? I always say to students, like, I want your shit detectors on, right? I want those to be the things you take out into the world. Now I teach in the humanities, so I can do that. But I want that to be part of all of the education that we do. And universities and colleges have wider and wider kinds of agendas of what they're teaching, right, or what they're offering. And I think sometimes we put those agendas in competition with each other, right? So we say, oh yeah, that's professional school, that's engineering, that's nursing, whatever, versus humanities and social sciences. And yet I think the questions have to inform each other, right? That
Yeah.
you can't, there's no knowledge that is I've said this three times, I think already, neutral, universal, and unchanging, right? And so if we don't ask the questions about what is the purpose of that knowledge, what are the consequences of those knowledges? These are my favorite questions. Students earlier this year made a bingo card of all the things that Anne says. And then on that bingo card was, what is the function and what are the consequences, right?
Yeah.
They're my favorite questions. Anyway, so I just really wanted to kind of emphasize what you were saying about employability is one thing, but there's I don't think we can separate those from all the other things that we do also.
No, and Anne, you've got me thinking, like, I'll just provide a real life context that we're living again
Yeah.
in Alberta. I'm sure you've all heard about the 10 referendum questions that are coming our way. And I hope, like, what I'm noodling on in my mind is all those people who are going to vote on those referendum questions. And I hope that everybody has access to post-secondary experiences where they can learn to meaningfully and critically evaluate the claims that are put forward in front of them, because those referendum questions they're biased, they're loaded, they're convoluted, and it's going to take a lot for folks to be able to navigate those in a meaningful way. So that's just a real life context that I wanted to share with people. So, Anna,
I'll just add to that
Yeah.
very quickly. Chris Anderson, who's used to be the dean of the Faculty of Native Studies at the University of Alberta, is the dean of something else right now. And apologies to Chris because I'm completely blanking. But he has a really good LinkedIn post from yesterday or today about precisely that,
Awesome.
about the part of the problem with these kinds of, and we know this, we see this happening all around us. These claims get made over and over again, and then they get taken as fact.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we're not able to kind of counter those claims, and if we don't see ourselves as part of a culture of countering those claims, right, then yeah, who knows?
Yeah, and I want to just add to that, and developing the capacity to counter those claims, it's tough work. So,
Oh, yeah.
so we need, how are we providing the learning experiences that allow students to progressively develop the ability to do that and to practice that ability in spaces that are brave, where they can make mistakes and learn from them and move forward, both individually and collectively. So we've hit on a little bit, and maybe I'll post this in the chat. And again, I hope folks, you're engaging in the chat and conversing with each other and thinking about noodling on and answering these questions in your own way as we dialogue as well. And I know you to be filled with critical hope. I know you to be a fiercely compassionate person. So, and I say that in the best way. So what is giving you hope right now?
I thought I was going to ask you that question.
Oh, and you can ask me. Do you want to do that?
Natasha, what is giving you hope right now?
What is giving me hope?
All the things you said. Go ahead. What is giving you hope right now?
I love it. Oh, we're working through this together. Thank you. Better together. We just modeled it.
We just did that.
So I guess I'm going to start with one, and I think this comes a lot from my coaching background has taught me a lot that it is possible to shift beliefs and cultures. And I'll use an example here is that when I think that folks, when we're grappling with Gen AI, one of the things I'm seeing when I engage in conversations with Gen AI is I think Gen AI has fundamentally challenged our beliefs and assumptions about teaching and learning, and our beliefs and assumptions, especially about the role of assessment in higher education. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're grappling so much with it. So I guess my first thing that gives me hope is that it is possible to shift beliefs and cultures, and that cultural change in universities starts with, and I think you emphasize this a bit too, how we think, what we believe, and the assumptions we make, not just what we do. And I think the not just focusing on what we do is a mistake many academic leaders make, and that we have to lean into how we uncover those fundamental beliefs and assumptions in order to move forward with meaningful change. So this is about, again, coming together as an academic community, asking meaningful questions, listening deeply, and genuinely reconsidering the deeply held assumptions we hold to respond with both care and intention to the challenges we're facing in higher ed. I may have touched on this already, but I think the other thing that's giving me hope right now is my work with Indigenous elders and Indigenous groups and communities, especially to move forward with the University of Calgary's Tapatope Indigenous strategy. And I'll share that on May 11th, we brought together over 130 community members on Tsuut'ina land to really think about how we can bring higher education into natural law and how we can continue to transform higher education. And Elder Leroy Little Bear gave one of the key conversations. Elder Leroy is a Blackfoot scholar. I encourage you all to read some of his writings. Follow up with me if you want access to those writings, because they're really critical. But he talked about how fundamentally we need to move higher education from being transactional to relational. Yeah, one of the things that made me chuckle during his talk was he provided the analogy that if you're wondering what transactional is, Trump is transactional. So I thought I thought that really stood out for me. But also the importance of he talked about that in Indigenous cultures that we should always be ready for change because flux, those interconnections and that dynamic flux is always happening. But he did really, and in his words, he said, right now we are living the realities, and I quote this, of a tired indoor pedagogy. So I think just sitting with that is really important. And then I'll just share really briefly the intentional and relational approaches which ground us. That is what gives me hope. And I think gathering in spaces like this, noodling with people as they come to my office to, move into a meeting or a conversation that is challenging them or others right now, it's that teaching and learning centers matter, teaching and learning matters. And at the heart of everything is our connection and relationships, not only with each other, but the world around us, which includes, and I'm going to quote, oh my gosh, it's going to come to me right now, Dwayne Donald, in saying that includes both our human and more than human relatives. So maybe I'll leave it at that. Shifts and change in beliefs are important. Seeking inspiration from Indigenous pedagogies and methodologies, and the heart of what we do is taking both intentional and relational approaches.
I'm going to say ditto to all of that, but I have more to say too, obviously. So
Yeah.
I think about I love the emphasis on thinking about relationality rather than transactional exchanges.
Yeah.
But of course the university, again, I say university, but I think post-secondary generally is a transactional institution, right? I mean, you come, you pay money, you do work, we give you marks, right? And we don't get out of that by trying things like ungrading and so forth. I mean, it's built into that system. And that's part of, for me, what I love and what I hate about universities is I want to challenge that system, but I also kind of love the space, that allows us to get together and really sort of think together through ideas, very complex ideas most of the time, right? I would say all of the time. Part of the larger context to go back to that idea is, and you know this because if you read comments at any time on social media, and I highly encourage you not to do that, but I actually had an interesting experience yesterday where I read them, and I was so buoyed by the kind of by so much of what people were saying, which is not usual, right? Because most of the time when I read the comments, I think that they're anti-compassion, they're anti-human, they're anti-relationality, right? That they're bringing out the worst in us sort of generically, right? In terms of the kind of nastiness and so forth. And so how and Natasha and I have never had a longer conversation about Gen AI, which I am completely opposed to in every way, because I think it is anti-humanity, anti-compassion, and so forth. That's for another discussion or another blog post or something. But I like what you also said about a culture of change, right? And that to change a culture is to change not just kind of the talk of that culture, but the what we do, how we do it, with whom we do it. That's process. Process is long, it's messy, it's hard, and it never ends. And I always want to really make that point, right? It's not like we have a checklist. This is what EDI work too often gets presumed to be, right? Is that it's a checklist, and once you've checked off the boxes, you're good, you've got there, and there's no product at the end of this, right? That if I've been I just finished 28 years at UPEI, right? So I'm not finished. Here I am, but and I learned something new every day, right? That this work is never complete. This work is process, and I always want to think. And I'm jumping into the third question here, right? But I always want to think about, like today, how do we set stages and invite people into conversations that we can engage in together through their messiness and difference and so forth, to think about that question of critical hope. At the end of last year, I love this question. At the end of last year, a student who was graduating came to my office and said, some of you know this because I've told this story often, but they came to my office and they said, how have you taught what you do for 27 years and not kind of crumbled under it? And so I flippantly said, oh, students, it's you folks, right? But actually not so flippantly, not flippantly at all, students, right? It is back to something Natasha said at the very beginning, right? The research you did and your sort of recognition that the engagement, the compassion, the care for the world, the desire for justice for more people, that is not all students, of course not. And I recognize students, coming into my classrooms and staying for multiple classes are a self-selected bunch, obviously. But I'm always amazed, no matter where I go, at the ways in which, at the levels of care, right? And so I kind of hope they take over the world soon, because we need more levels of care. So I think about that idea. I love that critical hope was the first thing, because I think of not just Jessica Riddell and Hope Circuits, right? But Carrie Grain in Critical Hope, Mariam Kaba and Kelly Hayes, who are sort of prison abolitionist community organizer, academic types, who are doing fabulous work, organizing people. I'm looking in the US right now, and I think about how hopeful you have to be, critically hopeful, right? Not in a kind of positivity sort of way, but in a recognition that the moment that we're in is complex and messy, and yet it needs all of us. And it needs all of us and whatever we bring to it, which will not be all the time, because sometimes you need to step out, etc. But how hopeful you have to be to hit the streets and the numbers of rallies and marches that we're seeing. How hopeful you have to be to get on a global flotilla heading toward Gaza, knowing exactly what's going to happen when you're intercepted, right? How hopeful you have to be to mobilize in your community, not just against ICE and whoever else shows up, but even locally here. Back to the poor Alberta is my example for everything, but back to, organizing at the level of your local community against referendum and so forth. So, and I think about so much is happening. This is the Gen AI question, Natasha, so much organizing around data centers and what data centers are going to do to water and so forth, right? And so, but that's an instantiation of critical hope. That's a recognition that it's messy and it's complicated and we may not get there, but if we don't do it, if we don't start from the messiness that we're in, we're not gonna, like it's never gonna happen, right? So I really hang on to that as I watch the larger context. I'm not cynical and jaded, folks. I'm kind of a happy person usually, even though I keep talking about the larger context is awful. But as I watch that larger context, what gives me hope constantly is the ways in which people are from our students onwards, are finding ways to intervene, right? To just kind of interject something. That seems to me really, really important. And that's the thing that I hang on to all the time.
And I think you're leading us, you're leading us into the next question beautifully.
Yes.
And I just want to share two reflections before I dive into this question. And one is that I was really grounded by I think it's Arthur Brooks. He's a positive psychologist from Harvard that talks about the distinction between optimism and hope. And I think I see this as toxic positivity and critical hope, actually. And it really helped me frame this discussion where optimism is, don't worry, everything will be okay.
Yeah.
But hope, or critical hope, is that things are really challenging, and here's the one thing I can do to move forward in a good way, even if it's kind of that right next step, right? I don't necessarily have to be have to be changing everything about the system right now, but I know I have agency over this one part, and I emphasize that word agency because this is leading us into the next question. And I'm going to put this question in the chat. So all of you also, I encourage you to share your reflections about how you would answer these questions. Where do you or we feel we have agency right now, whether that be in our local context or practices or larger? And what do we want for PSE, post-secondary education, to do now? Like what do we think our responsibilities are? So I'll let you start off and then add some reflections.
Well, and so I'm going to jump back for a moment, even though you just took us there, because I think about how, equity, we talked about sort of teaching as teaching as an equity issue, right?
Yeah.
That all we can ever, so when you first kind of like encounter the mess that is the world, you're like, I can't do anything. It's too big and everything's connected. And how the hell do I intervene? Where do I enter? Right. And so that becomes like the first year problem, right? As they're sort of like encountering all this stuff. Of course, not everybody, many people know this before and they live this, right, before. So, but I think about if one of the most important things I can teach along the way is precisely what you said, right? What's the one thing you can do, right? How can you intervene, enter into, do something now in a way that one hopes has ripple effects, right? But like, you're not going to solve it all. It's not a checklist, right? We're not going to solve it all by coming up with the things. And so agency, jumping into that. And I'm not only catching part of the chat, but I'm just loving what I'm seeing. I think about my own agency to begin with, right? And I say this often, that the only people who are well protected in a university are full professors. Right? We have no more hoops to go through. I get that people at other stages, like assistant or associate prof, sometimes feel like, there might be some repercussions down the line, and there certainly are if we look at what happened around some of the encampments in support of Palestine a couple of years ago on many Canadian university campuses. But also, 50% or more of our professoriate at the university level, higher at community colleges is precarious. Right. And so the only people who are fully perfected are full professors, which of course is ironic because by the time you get there, any number of our colleagues have withdrawn. Right. They've stepped away. And so I'm always like, where are you? Come back. You're the voices we need. And so I think of my responsibility, my agency, and my responsibility is to my community, and my community at UPEI, for instance, is to speak up as much as possible, to be the one who I don't know, points the finger, asks the challenging questions, right? That recognizes that I do this, and that I have to do this because I'm one of the few people able to do this. And I hate that. The material conditions of our work are so important to keep in mind here. The fact that I start this answer to this question by saying only some of us are protected enough to do this is awful. Right? We should all be like, our material conditions should make it possible for all of us, but they don't right now. And so part of what I will always also say is, how come it's only people like me who can speak up? Right? Yeah. Anyways, there's some, there's obviously limits to some of that protection. Yeah, as we saw, as I said. Um, but the other agency that I have and that I take right now is um, is events like today, right? I think, and again, full professor, nearing the end of her career, even though I love this job and I never want to leave it. But, I'm not going to be at UPEI for another 28 years. And so part of what I think right now is what are the ways in which knowledge dissemination and production can happen? And for me, it's about how many webinars can I organize? How many stages can I set to bring people together to engage in those wicked problems, the messiness of the world. That's the agency that I see for myself, but also that I would love post-secondary education more generally to take on is let us find ways to to make that knowledge production and dissemination part of a much larger conversation outside of the walls of the ivory tower, right? And bring more and more people into those conversations. Yeah, because that's the only way things are going to change. So that's my own agency, but also what I want post-secondary to be doing right now, to go meta on ourselves all the time, to always ask in the what we're doing, back to a point from earlier, in the what we're doing, to ask with whom are we doing it, how are we doing it, and to add other questions. What are the consequences of what we're doing? Natasha, go. I know you got lots to
Well,
say about this
and
one
I'm
too.
just putting, and you've repeated those questions a few times, and I think this is so important. And I wanted to capture those in the chat a little bit. And I agree. And Juan Carlos, I know I'll try and keep my reflections brief, so we have a few minutes for questions and final reflections. But for me, and I say that again, I'm glad, and you reflected on your positionality at the beginning, because I also share these reflections as a white, cisgendered, female academic leader who is tenured at an institution. And I know that I too recognize that agency varies greatly across the institution. So for me, even at the most basic level, I say basic but hard to practice. How I show up and the intentions that ground me are so important every day, and I have agency over that. And one of the things I've reflected on, especially in my mid to latter stages of my academic and leadership career, is that in order to show up as the leader I need to be, I have agency over how much sleep I get. What am I engaging in physical activity? Am I eating in a way that supports my body? Am I engaging in mindfulness activities? Am I meaningfully contributing and connecting to the communities, to the folks around me? And I say this because those activities impact how I am able to respond rather than react in stressful situations and challenging situations each and every day. So that I did want to start there. But something that I've also learned about in terms of having agency is I have the ability when things are too complex to be humble enough, to be wise enough to say, I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to get the right folks around the table to have a conversation. And when I'm at that table, ask who haven't we included that should be here. So those are a couple of things that I reflect on. And then I think I'm just looking through some of my notes here, and I know this has come up. And yeah, I hope I got your name right. Is that I think living into those practices that ground me most each and every day. So some of those for me are leading through curiosity, building relationships and psychological safety wherever I can, breaking down silos so that knowledge sharing, which usually confines how change happens across our institutions, is really important to me. Acknowledging emotions, which we are not terribly good at in higher education, engaging in shared decision making and planning, and aligning our work with a larger whole. Lastly, one of the things I've thought that's really important, which I do more and more, is also modeling self-compassion. And I'll go back to that. Psychological safety is a tough term. I know it's a term that not everybody really resonates with in higher ed. But one of the things that's most important to me is to model that it's okay to make mistakes, and to be very to be very aware of when we are too self-critical in front of other people, because I think that what happens then is we inadvertently create a culture of fear rather than a culture of trust, learning, and curiosity when we do that. So that's something, psychological safety and self-compassion are my two leadership kind of goals for the year, that are guiding my practice. So I'll maybe leave it at that with one thing, is that the thing I hope most for higher education right now is to recenter our work on the deeper purpose, values, and impact that we're having. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
And I'll just add really quickly. So I loved all of that, and I said jokingly in the chat, "Sleep? What's that?" So maybe that's a thing. I walk a dog. I walk a dog a lot. She's old and arthritic now, but we get out there anyways. I joke around, right? I teach diversity and social justice studies. That I joke around that I teach outrage and despair, right? Which the students tell me a lot. But I also have become much more aware and articulate about, I think, in the last quite a few years, that this cannot be talked about without thinking about relationality and community, right? That it's not just like the, you know what I said before about sort of like invitations and how do you sort of set stages to bring people together. And, again, the sort of cliche that I say is like, shaking your finger at people and telling them to stop being X, right? It didn't work to get me to clean my room when I was 10. Why is it going to work to get people to stop being a racist, right? Like that's not going to work. And so how do you kind of set stages to bring people together to articulate what are the functions, consequences, et cetera, but what are the relationships at stake here, right? And if we don't learn good relational capacities, we cannot live together in a democratic society. And the fact that 3/4 of the world's population lives under authoritarian governments right now, I think is really telling about the things we're not good at, to go back to what you just said, Natasha, and we're not very good at thinking about our relational capacities.
Love it.
Didn't mean to end on that downer, but anyway.
So we have 6 official minutes to the end of our time together. I know we may be able, if the speakers are willing to stay a bit longer, but just I'm marking the 6 minute left time, especially for people who have to go to the next thing. So should we entertain questions or comments from the audience then? All right, unmute yourself. Type more in the chat. I've loved this active chat. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you. Thank you everyone for engaging. And I see many familiar names. For us?
Sorry, Juan Carlos, can you save the chat for us? Oh
yes,
yeah,
I can.
We're recording. Yeah, okay.
Yes. Any questions, any comments?
Can I just respond to Cynthia's last point here? I love that idea. And I go back to what will it take to make our campuses safe enough for people to call out harm?
Yeah.
Right. UPEI, as many of you know, so yeah, we went through a thing, right? And what we have in print is whatever university has, right? So we went through this whole workplace investigation that took like many years, and now we have an action plan and the Rubin Tomlinson report, and that documented just how toxic, to use that word, our workplace was. Probably no different than most, but we have it in print. So part of what the new president and all the new senior administration are really talking about is how do we create a culture of change, or how do we change the culture? How do we work towards a culture of safety, inclusion, and I always blank on the third one. Anyways, and that takes what does that take? That takes a lot of things, but what will it take to get there, right? So that people can say this is about harm, and not feel like they're putting something on the line by saying that. Belonging. Thank you, Charlene.
Well, naming it and having the report as sarcastic as we can be about it, is very important. I think silence has been very harmful and protected the oppressors for too long. So that is one thing that I think is really important. Just being able to name the harm.
Well, and I think here too, leaning into some of the research that Amy Edmondson has done on psychological safety is really helpful. There's some emerging work about how creating psychologically safe workplaces is more supportive of those who identify in equity deserving groups. However, I have also had folks say, like, psychologically safe for whom? And this, I think, Anne, goes back to a lot of the fundamental questions that you have shared and in the past too, is how are we creating spaces of trust, respect, inclusion, belonging within our everyday academic context?
We tend to stay away from belonging and have embraced more the mattering, you matter. Because belonging comes loaded. I understand the intention, but sometimes it comes loaded that, do I have to assimilate to be able to belong? And
Yeah,
that's a
absolutely.
conversation. But
Yeah.
so you matter.
Creating a culture, they're creating a culture of inclusion. And I always say, like, inclusion into what and on whose terms, right? Like that question, that term has to be complicated as much as it also has to be what moves and directs us.
Yeah, so we're seeing people moving to the next meeting.
I got no more meetings till tomorrow.
Thank
Stay and
you.
talk.
Thank you, Juan Carlos, for inviting us in and for
Yeah.
and thank you all for having your patience through our reflections and dialogue. And I hope you take these questions into your own context, honestly, and continue them.
Yeah, it's been incredible. That the chat has been incredible. Your conversation has been as usually amazing and enlightening. So thank you both for doing this.